Welcome back to In Light of the Gospel. This is episode 108. I had the great privilege today of speaking with Lucian Janzen. He is the oldest son of one of my teenage best friends, John Janzen, a local pastor here at Beacon Bible Chapel. It's a really neat experience and a great privilege for me to be able to have those types of conversations about testimonies, about theology, about sin and judgment, about Christ with one of my friend's sons. He's a very thoughtful, very serious young individual. And it took him a long time. He got saved at an early age, recognized his need for a Savior, came to Christ, sought forgiveness, and felt reconciled to God from a very early age. But it wasn't until he got to be about 17 or 18 to where the reality of his own sinfulness really kind of set in. And we discuss the nuances of that. It took him a while to see, hey, just because I haven't done the outward sins of such and such a person doesn't mean I don't have my own flaws, my own errors, my own sinfulness. And so it took him a while, and when he saw it, it became a very deep thing for him. It's something he's still working through, but it has drove him to a deeper appreciation and a better understanding of what Christ has done. From there, we kind of fast forward into his now life. He's married for about the last 2 years, and he recently went on a trip with an organization called CCBR. They raise awareness about the abortion industry and the fact that Canada has no abortion laws. There's no limitations on abortion in Canada. And there's a real lack or a misunderstanding in people's minds about what it actually is. And they've trying to expose the fact that it really is taking a human being and ripping it apart, pulling it out of a mother's womb and disposing of it in like as if it's trash. And so he saw that when he went for training down in Florida, and now just feels like him and his wife Amy, they just want to give their life to this. So they're going to go for training in the summer, and their goal is, if the Lord is willing, to give themselves fully to this ministry and this service. And I think it's a much needed service for our society as a whole to come on board with the idea that it's unthinkable to rip a baby out of its mother's womb. So I appreciate you coming around, and hopefully this conversation will get into the hearts and minds of the correct people, and more people will come to faith in Christ because of Lucian's testimony, and hopefully because of the sinfulness and debauchery of abortion, that people will get on board and help support him through prayer and maybe eventually financially as well. But he's not looking for that at this point, but I hope that will be the case. So thanks again for coming around, and God bless you. So most of the guys that I end up interviewing are people who have a pretty scattered past,
Right.
or some dark thing in their history. It's usually probably either and or. They were like really into drugs, alcohol, smoking, drinking, sleeping around, who knows what all. Or, and sometimes they were extremely religious, like
Right.
very, very conservative, and it has to be done this way, and they grew up maybe in Mexico or whatever. But your kind of testimony, believe it or not, is the ones that I most wish people would have, if I've understood your story correctly.
Yeah. That would. Sometimes I'm tempted to think that my testimony isn't worth a lot because it's very boring in a sense.
Exactly.
But I think that it's been very, very helpful for me, both personally and with the people I'm around, to be able to speak into their lives as well, just with my upbringing and
Yep.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've always wanted my kids to have boring testimonies. Mine was not the dark drinking, drugs, alcohol. It was a little bit more like your dad's, where I was kind of a good Mennonite boy, and I tried to obey the rules and do things correctly, but I became very religious and kind of legalistic.
Right.
And it was hard to come out of that. So when I did get saved, it was very drastic. And Jesus says, he that is forgiven much loveth much. And sometimes I've worried about our own children, like you and my kids, that maybe they won't realize how much they've been forgiven, right? Because, well, I haven't really been that bad. I'm mostly pretty good, right? So how do you tell me for what it was like as a young boy growing up in a pastor's home and thinking about God and the way that you thought about him?
My dad's been a pastor for almost 15 years now.
Probably almost as long as you can remember.
Yeah. I would have a few memories from before he was a pastor, but most of my life he's been in that role, or at least in a deacon role or some sort of teaching or serving in the church almost my whole life from what I can remember. And he taught me and my siblings very well. Like, looking back on it now, they did an excellent job, my parents, in raising us, teaching about who God is, what he did for us, and just learning about the Bible, memorizing Bible verses. And they never forced anything on us.
Okay.
Which sometimes I think, or have thought, that why didn't they push it a little bit more? Why didn't they talk about this or ask about this? But I think some of it was just because they wanted it to be a personal choice for each of us. Mm-hmm. So they gave us everything we needed to know, and I think they waited for us to make that choice instead. At least from my experience, that's how it was. And so it was a very good upbringing. There weren't negative things really in the home, and it was a real blessing in that way.
Some kids grow up, and like, if you look from the outside, the home looks really religious, very upright, very sincere. They put on good clothes, they dress the part, they act the part, they look the part. And as soon as the kids turn 16 or 18, they're out the door. They hate whatever they were raised under. And it's hard to sometimes pinpoint exactly what the problems were. But somehow parents need to make it attractive. They need to help their kids to see that the gospel is for them also, that church is important and there's a reason for it. And so can you think of any things that maybe made that prominent to you? Or actually, maybe I should even go further back. And how did you personally relate to God as a young child? Do you remember?
I got saved when I was 6. I still remember the day. I felt a calling from what I remember. Talked to my mom and dad about it, and I think they prayed with me. It's hard to remember, but I obviously didn't have a full understanding.
Sure.
And I still don't.
I was just going to say, do you now?
No. Of what the gospel really was and how much it meant. And just growing up with the knowledge that I was saved, I never had significant, like, really strong doubts that I was saved.
Okay.
So that was beneficial for me.
So you went from innocent child to saved innocent child.
Yeah.
And there was never a moment where you're like, I'm severely lost.
No.
Interesting.
No, I never had that in my life.
What brought you to wanting to get saved then at 6 years old?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember I was sitting outside. Why a 6-year-old was sitting outside, I don't know. Yeah. I was just sitting and thinking, and I thought I felt a call. And I talked to my parents about it, and that's all that I can remember about it. Mm-hmm. But what you were saying about he who is forgiven much loves much.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize that I was forgiven much. I thought that I was forgiven little, because when I looked at my friends or other people around me, my age maybe, even like growing up into my teen years, I saw a lot of things in their lives that I thought were bad or wrong, that I didn't do. And so I would compare them to myself and think, oh, well, I don't do those things, so I'm a better person in a sense of that. And because of that, I didn't realize how much I needed God's grace. And because I didn't realize how much I needed his grace, there was less of a love for him.
Right. That's always my fear.
Yeah. I would look at some of my friends' lives, maybe ones who recently had got saved, like in my teen years, who had come from a rough past.
Yep.
And I could see a very deep love for Christ that I didn't even have. And I had been saved for...
I'm the good one.
Yeah.
They were bad.
Yeah. I had been saved for like around 10 years already.
Yeah.
I read my Bible consistently. I prayed consistently. I went to church my whole life. I did all of these good things. I knew lots about the Bible, about my beliefs, but that same love for Christ wasn't there.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize how much I needed.
So you think it's just a matter of perspective?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know when I'm disciplining and teaching, training my kids, I try to find their sin in their little subtle, sometimes character flaws, sometimes slight disobedience, where I'll see them, like get really frustrated or angry with their brother. Then I can use that example. Like Jesus says, if you get angry with your brother without a cause, you've committed murder in your heart. Mm-hmm. And so you might not feel like you're as bad yet because you didn't do anything. Maybe you hit him, maybe you hit through his toy or something.
Yeah.
But that same attitude is like a seedling form of murder. It's not like it is better to get angry and not murder than it is to murder.
Right.
Like murder's worse. But the seed is there. The tendency, the potential is already there, right? So it's a matter of perspective, recognizing that, shoot, I'm also in trouble with God. If you've broken one, you've broken the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went through your 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and even into your teen years, and always recognizing that you were right with God.
It's not that I thought I didn't sin.
Mm-hmm.
It was just not a full realization of the fact that if you sin in one sense, you sin against the whole law.
Okay.
And that because of that, you're just as guilty as someone who's done all of these terrible things. One thing that helped me to think about it better was seeing this little photo of the way God sees sin. And so we see sin from a side view where we see all these different levels like a bar graph. But the way this photo explained it, God sees sin from up above, where you just see the top of all the sin and they're all on the same level. It's all just sin. Now, while some sins obviously have worse consequences than others,
For sure.
sin is viewed on the same level. And so my small sins disqualified me as much as someone else's larger sins.
That's a good statement, the disqualified thing. I remember when I used to teach a youth group quite a bit, and when I would go through Romans chapter 1, there's that list of sins that just sounds like horrendous. You can't even imagine almost anybody doing these things. Yeah. Unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, maliciousness, envy, murder, debate. I would try to draw this circle of people that you could throw into there and say, that person, this person, the other person, like whoremongers, adulterers, homosexuals, they all belong in this circle. And then all of a sudden he says in the middle of it, covetousness. Should I go in that circle? No. I'm still out here, right? Yeah. And then he says deceit. Oh shoot, I've been pretty deceitful at times. Yeah. So am I kind of in that? No, I don't belong with the murderers and the whoremongers. Then he goes on and says proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, and the circle starts getting wider and wider and wider to the end. And that's kind of his point in Romans. He says that the whole world would become guilty before God. Every mouth would be stopped. And so you might think you're better. And like you said, Jesus even says that Sodom and Gomorrah will suffer less punishment than Samaria or than Judah during Jesus' day, because they had Jesus, so they have more punishment coming their way. But when you look from the top down, it's these ever-widening circles where we all fit into that circle, right? Yeah. So was there a moment where you started to see your guilt or your real need?
Yeah. There was a specific day that it started. So I was working at my job the one day. I was probably 17, 18 years old.
Okay.
Probably 18. And before then already, God had been really teaching me and helping me to grow in a lot of areas. Even before I started to really grow, I was reading my Bible consistently. But in my 14, 15, 16 years old, I started to actually understand a lot more about what I was reading and how it could apply to me. in a way that I didn't when I was younger and I
Yeah.
was reading, because it was the thing to do. But when I was about 17, 18 years old at work, I was in a team leader role at work, and so I had charge over one department, and when people would come in to join that department, I would train them, and there were never a lot of us in there. Usually it was 2 or 3 people, but I would be responsible for training them, making sure standards were kept, and just the department ran smoothly. And the one guy I was working with, a little while before already, we had been having some disagreements. And I didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of it was my fault, because as a team leader, I was very, very judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a micromanager, and I was very strict, and my standards had to be kept like at the highest cost. And I was a terrible team leader in that regard. And my coworker could see it. I couldn't see it.
Right.
And so it led to a lot of conflict sometimes with us. And I remember the one day specifically, he had got very, very angry with me. And understandably, I was not treating him right. It was impacting him, I think, a lot more than I realized, definitely more than I realized. But we were arguing or going back and forth, he was quite angry about it. And he said something that really cut to my heart. He said it wasn't really about the way I was treating him. It was more about something inside, something deeper. And that he said that at the end of the day, he left work. I was still at work doing whatever, cleaning up. But that statement really stuck with me, because it was almost like a light bulb went on in my head, because I realized, oh, you know what? There is something deeper that I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
There is a sense in which I have been judging him and comparing him to myself, and not extending grace like I should be.
Thinking yourself better in some way, or
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like morally speaking, or just at the job?
Both.
Okay.
In every way.
Yeah.
And that was the start of a really big sanctification process for me. Starting then specifically, I started to really realize that I judged people a lot. Not just that coworker, but like all my coworkers, or family, or friends, or just everyone.
Anybody who didn't live to your standard of
Yes.
expectations, yeah.
And and as weeks and months went on, the more I started to realize that the cause of that judgment that I would give to others was a pride in my own life.
There you go.
And I would push others down to lift myself up. I would say, well, compared, like if I take me and I take this other person, I'm morally better than them, or I do this better than them.
Yep.
And so then I would judge them for that. And I hit it very, very well, right? Like I was reading the Bible and I was doing these things. I was treating people.
Still with kindness and stuff, yeah.
But it was a lot of judgment in my head mentally.
Yeah.
And so, like even in a youth group, I would see certain people doing certain things and I would judge them for it. I wouldn't say anything. Maybe I wouldn't go and be friendly to them or like be friends with them, but I wasn't like mean to them or anything. I just, in my head, I would think, oh, they're wrong. Oh, that person's wrong. That person's wrong. They're doing this wrong.
How did you try to balance that with, like, actually, let's say someone is living in sin, like you should make a judgment about that, right? Like there should be something about that lifestyle that's like, hey, this is inappropriate, or that's an error.
A lot of it was that, but not all of it.
Yeah.
And I sort of grouped it all together. Any way that someone was different than the way I lived my life, in a sense, was wrong.
Interesting. I would have done things like that. Let's say you see some Hollywoodized movie or a popular singer icon type of person, and they have a certain style about them, a certain look about them, and they have a debauched lifestyle, whatever it might be, and then you see somebody who has a similar look. You can just categorize them. Oh, you wear clothes like that, you're over here.
Right.
You wear your hat that way, you belong to this group, right? And you can start making assessments and judgments way too quick, and you categorize them into certain groups. I'm not sure if that's kind of what you're thinking, but
it was very much in that sense too.
okay. Yeah. The Bible, in the book of Hebrews, it says that the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, and it cuts the dividing asunder of thought and intent of the heart, right? The joints and marrow. And so a lot of times you can justify your thoughts. Like, yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm doing the right thing. I'm believing the right thing. This is based on the scriptures.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden the scriptures cuts down to the intents. Like, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
What's your reason behind this? Why are you, disregarding this person or her opinion, his opinion? And it gets pretty deep.
It does.
It's hard to, and so you said this started a real process, eh?
Yeah. That was one of the defining moments of my life and in my faith. Because I started to realize how much sin was actually in my life, and how this thought and this pride was impacting so much around me and so many other people and the way I treated other people. And I realized, wow, I'm actually not a really good person.
Not as good as I thought.
No. and that hit me hard. And I started to realize, oh, I actually really need God's grace.
Okay.
I really need the cross. I need this forgiveness for my sins. And when I started to realize that, how much I had sinned and how much I needed God's forgiveness, then my love for Christ started to grow as well.
Interesting, yeah.
Because I realized I was forgiven much. And so from then on, I started to love more. And I can see that as a very clear difference when I was younger and I didn't have that same love for Christ.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize how much I needed his grace, compared to after I realized the sin in my life and how much I needed the grace, and how my love for him has grown exponentially since then.
Interesting. Another thing that Jesus said, actually, he said that I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. Now you can imagine his crowd of people he was speaking to. Here's his disciples who all know they're sinners, and they're excited about the grace of God. So they're like, oh good, he came for me. And then there's another group of people, Pharisees. They're clearly sinners also. Everybody knows that, except for they themselves. They don't recognize it. They're like, oh, so you didn't come for me because I'm a righteous person. No, I came for you too, but as long as you see yourself as righteous, there's nothing I can do for you. A doctor doesn't come to heal those that are healthy and well, or those who think they're healthy and well. You have to recognize a real need. And even just not seeing your need is a sin, right? Like not seeing that, hey, I really need God. I need a savior. Right? So you said it drove you to the cross. Was like this a fresh revelation too then of what Christ had done?
Yeah, it freshened it up a lot for me. Obviously I knew the gospel well, and like I was still reading my Bible in prayer and in church, and it's just that all of the truths that I knew started to become more real to me, where I would read and then realize, oh wow, this means so much more to me now. And it was just a very clear defining moment of a change in my life. Not necessarily outward, like obviously it did translate to an outward change as well, but more so in my mind and in my heart, where I started to realize how much I needed God's grace. And
now seeing some of what you maybe would have just seen as this is just my character, or this is just my upbringing, you're like, no, this is actual sinful behavior. Yeah, interesting. Did it affect that actual relationship, the one where the coworker?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The next day I apologized to him because I still didn't fully realize what was causing it.
Right.
Like I told him, hey, I'm sorry, I have been judging you and I have been doing it for a long time. And he asked me why. And I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe my upbringing. I wasn't quite sure. And as time went on, still working with the same coworker, I started to realize more and more it was just a pride in myself. And it wasn't that the conflict was just done after that. There were
It's
still,
not like you're automatically fixed.
No. There were still times where we would go back and forth. But it got better and better and better because I started to realize, okay, I need to extend grace here. I cannot view him that way because that's not right. And it definitely made a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I would say that we have a friendship now, in a way. Whereas when I was treating him so terribly, it was not a good relationship.
Right. There's no way a friendship could develop out of that.
No.
Yeah. I find that even after being a Christian for 22 years now, almost, no, just over 22 years, there's times when I feel more sinful than I ever did back then, where I recognize that all of my stuff is tainted somehow.
Yeah.
Or I went through a pretty big relational conflict in the last few years, and I try to own up to my faults pretty quickly. But even in that, sometimes like, okay, I did kind of own up to it, but there's a depth to sometimes my own selfishness that I'm still not really fully seeing. And every now and then I'll catch glimpses of it, and it's like, oh man, I'm never gonna get rid of that. That's me, right? But no, I'm a new creature. I can walk in newness of life, right? But it gets deep sometimes. Yeah. So where did that lead you then? You were still in like a youth group. You weren't married or anything like that yet at this point.
No, I was dating at that point, but I was still single. And
you had some conversations about it though with your family or your girlfriend, now wife.
With my girlfriend, I did. My family, not so much. It was very new to me, and I was still learning and growing as we went. No, I did talk to my dad about it. I did.
Some of it's hard to define though too, right?
It is, because I was very unaware of what it even was when it first clicked. And it took time to really realize what the root of it was, and that it came down to a pride in my own life. A putting down of other people so that I could be lifted up in a way.
Sometimes you can even, so let's say you relay the story, exactly how it happened, and you tell somebody, your friend maybe, or your dad, or whoever it might be, and they'd be like, yeah, no, I think you're right. But you yourself know, no, there was an intent in it. There was something that's disguised and hidden. It's like a deep sin that you can't even quite put your finger on sometimes. But you're like, no, I was not correct. But then you can feel self-justified, right? Because so-and-so approved it, and they were on my side.
I experienced that. Yep. I would talk to people about it, or some people, and this was before the realization for me. And they would side with me, and I would feel sort of good about it. But you're right, there was something there. I don't know if this is quite right.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's actually all their fault. Because most of the conflict we had before the realization, I thought it was his problem. I thought he was the problem and not me. And obviously that leads to a lot more conflict when you can't really
especially
take the
when
blame.
Parts of it probably were his problem, right?
Some
like
parts may have been.
that's almost all situations. Even in marriage, I've often talked about, like, when something feels really hurtful between a husband and a wife, both sides typically feel pretty justified. Like they feel like, hey, they did this. And so you can hold out and just say it's her fault, and I'm going to just hold her to it until she recognizes it. Or you can say, okay, maybe 10% of it was my fault. Can you own up to 10%? Yeah, you know what? If I wouldn't have said that one thing, it wouldn't have escalated. And that, as soon as you give yourself 10% of the blame, all of a sudden you realize, no, it's probably closer to 25. shoot, no. If I would have done that, it's 50. That's probably like half and half. No, do you know what? I could have stopped this whole thing, you know. And before you know it, you can take this extreme ownership and recognize I'm actually to blame in the whole thing. Of course, she had her faults. This guy probably had his faults, but you know that I could have stopped all of it.
That's exactly what it was. I could have stopped all of it. Maybe there were some things that he was dealing with or going through, but for me, I could have stopped it, and I didn't. I rather just pushed it all on him and said it's his fault.
Yeah,
it's his fault. Or in my head, I would say that.
Yeah,
very damaging.
Yeah. So I've titled this podcast "In Light of the Gospel," because when you come to realize the gospel and see Christ's death and sacrifice for us, it changes everything, right? It can revamp how you do marriage, how you do business, how you do relationship, how you work on your job and all that. So do you know which parts about the gospel, what aspect of Christ on the cross started to become very monumental to you? Or any specific parts, you know, like righteousness imputed, or crucifixion together with Christ, our identity in him, or those kinds of things? Or did it just kind of all start meaning more?
I think it all just started meaning more.
Yeah.
I think just the fact that Christ took my sin and died for me, knowing what I did ahead of time, or what I would do ahead of time, and dying for that when I didn't even realize and didn't even know. Because I was very blind to it. Like, throughout my teen years, most of the time I didn't really realize that I had that deep-rooted pride in my life. Mm-hmm. So it was mainly just the realization, wow, Jesus died for me, and I did all of these bad things. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Pride is probably one of the most difficult to truly discover. If you ask anybody if they think they're proud, no, I'm not. If you ask anybody, do you think you're a liar? Well, yeah, I've lied. Do you think this or that, the other thing? Yeah, I've done this. Yes, I've done that. Are you proud? No, I don't think so. But we all are to some degree, right? We all have arrogance and pride. Even many times our humility, what we deem as humility, is actually just a disguised pride. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I'm nothing special. Like, I'm just being humble. You know, like, if you're doing it for appearances, then even that's pride, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis says that the way to discover if someone is struggling with pride is to ask them if they're proud. And if they say no, it means that they're struggling with pride. Because the nature of pride is that pride is behind every sin. And it was the very first sin, right?
Interesting.
When Satan rebelled against God, and then when Satan was tempting the woman in the garden, it was the pride, the desire to be like God.
Yeah.
And every sin comes back to a focus on ourselves and our desires and our wants. Mm-hmm. And it really is one of the things that causes all the other sin. And so someone says, no, I don't deal with pride. They just don't realize it.
You haven't recognized some things, yeah. I heard one preacher once years ago say too, and he was referring to church conflict, church splits and all that, but really it would apply to any conflict. He said, if you're in conflict, there's pride somewhere. On one side or on both sides. There's no way to stand your ground and stand firm and be, adamant that I'm right, without having some pride. Mm-hmm. Jesus stood against his accusers, and when they accused him, he just was silent. But during his lifetime, he had times when he really rebuked them and came down hard on them. So, of course, there's times when it's justified to be angry with somebody and to put them in their place. But usually, two sinful people having a disagreement, there's pride somehow involved. Yeah. And like you said, pretty much all sins have pride somewhere behind them. Yeah. Interesting. Did what time or what age were you when you got baptized?
I think I was 14.
Okay, so you waited quite a few years after your conversion.
Yeah. Some of my friends were getting baptized at that point too. For me, I hadn't really thought about it beforehand. And so I was like, oh, I guess I should get baptized. Like, I've been saved. I am saved. Mm-hmm. I know the gospel. And so I got baptized, but I mean, obviously then I didn't know as full my need for the gospel as I did a few years later.
Yeah.
And it'll be the same a few years from now.
Sure. Yeah, I'm often very encouraged by the Old Testament stories and the New Testament references to those stories. Say, for instance, Abraham. We look at his Old Testament story and you think, man, this guy, he just didn't trust God. He went into Hagar, he went down into Egypt, he lied to the Pharaoh. He's doing all these things. He's asking for his servant Eliezer to be his seed and all this stuff. Then you read the New Testament description of it. It says he was strong in faith, not wavering. He believed firmly the promises of God and all that. And you're like, are you reading the same thing I am, God?
Yeah.
But to me, it's very encouraging to recognize that little Lucian, 6, 7, 8 years old, you're believing God that he sent Christ to die for your sins. And I look at you as a judgmental adult and say, you don't even know what you're talking about.
Right.
And God's like, I'm counting him righteous.
Mm-hmm.
He believes me.
Mm-hmm.
He's strong in faith, right? And so sometimes young people are deceived. They're not truly saved, and they need to actually get saved. But in many cases, simple, childlike faith is all God is looking for. So this time of sanctification, did it lead to a renewal then publicly too? Did you start confessing Christ more to people?
Not publicly. More so with friends or family or just personal conversations like this.
But all of a sudden Christ has a meaning that you feel you need to share, eh?
Yes,
Yeah.
a lot more so.
Yeah. Yeah, most people don't start like public. When I say publicly, I mean more like all of a sudden you're like, hey, Christ did this, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember in youth group the one time, my one friend and I were talking to another guy who wasn't saved, and we were sharing the gospel with him, and this was before I started to really realize how much I needed it. But I was explaining the gospel to this other fellow along with my friend, and I was referring to the way you feel empty and like you need to be filled, like Jesus can fill that hole.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was saying that, I was realizing I don't really know what that's like. I don't really know how much I need it.
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking about it later on, and I didn't have that full understanding of the gospel for myself to where I could explain it well to others. Like I may have been saying the right things, but it didn't have the full meaning for myself.
Yeah. And you find that even as a saved individual, when you feel really ugly, you know that you've been sinful, that kind of creates almost that feeling of, man, if I didn't have Christ, this would be a deep gap. Like this would be a big cavity in my life, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely had that, where you have nowhere to turn, and you're just like, man, God, I'm so grateful that somehow all of this, my life, doesn't interfere with my relationship to you. Like it doesn't stop anything. The fellowship is complete. It's Christ's sacrifice for once for sins, all for all sins, right? Like it's complete. Yeah. So maybe tell us how you developed a relationship. I mean, we don't have to go into full detail about how you met your wife and got married, but it's obviously led us to this newfound desire to minister in this capacity. So a brief story there.
Yeah, so I met my wife in youth. I had known her for a long time. Her family had been coming to the church for, I think, since it started. But I just knew who she was, and there wasn't much more than that. And then in youth, a few of us youth started to hang out separately on weekends, and it was a few guys, a few girls. We were the good youth in the group.
Oh yeah.
That also reinforced my judgmental views in a sense. So we would like have a Bible study or something on the weekend.
Sing some songs.
We didn't do the singing.
No, okay.
But it was a very good group. It helped us to grow a lot in our faith, to be more vocal with it with other believers, because at that younger age, you don't really talk about your faith with people, or at least we didn't. Like just coming into youth, 14, 15 years old, it just wasn't really to talk. Like you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You're in church. You listen to the services.
Discuss theology or something, right? Yeah.
But this was a way for us to talk about it and grow in that way. So there were definitely benefits to that group as well. But that's where, like, my wife was, not wife then, obviously. She was a part of that group. And I was a bit of a chicken when it came to talking to her. And so I would, we just started texting back and forth. I started to get to know her better in that way. And then about 3.5 to 4 years ago, then asked her on a date and asked her to be my girlfriend. That was the second time we had ever talked alone.
Did you have to talk to her dad?
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't have to, I don't think.
It just seemed appropriate.
Yeah. I talked to her dad before I talked to her, before she even knew. So looking back, I think there's some things I would do differently. But
sure. But we live in a very different culture now than the society and culture around us, right? Where to us it's like, yeah, of course I'd talk to her dad. But the world around us, the average 16, 18, 19-year-old would be like, what are you talking about? I'm not getting married to her.
Yeah.
What's it his business, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no, to me, that seems the proper, respectful route. Like, I want to get to know your daughter. Is this appropriate? Is this okay? Do you see any red flags in me? Yeah. That was kind of the approach?
Yeah.
Okay. And he was good with you?
Yep, he was.
Okay.
Yeah. And so,
how long did you guys date for then?
We dated for just over a year. So we started dating in August. The next year in October, I proposed. We got engaged and then got married the following year in May.
Okay.
So it's almost 2 years now.
Almost 2 years since your wedding.
Since our wedding.
Yeah. There you go. And obviously, even marriage, and maybe some people don't experience it as early, or where it exposes a lot more sinfulness in us yet, right?
Yes.
Where I think it was Timothy Keller put this illustration together where he said, if you go underneath a big concrete bridge, everything looks fine, it looks good. Then you put a weight of a Mack truck fully loaded on it, and then you see all these lines and cracks show up. The truck didn't produce those lines and those cracks, but the weight of the truck is exposing them. And so marriage can very much do that. It brings a lot of benefits and blessings to it, but it'll expose you in ways that you could never have exposed if you didn't have to live in relation, that close proximity to somebody else who also has their problems, right?
Yeah.
So that started a whole new sanctification process?
It did, yeah. It showed me a lot more of the same pride that was in my life, maybe from a different perspective that I wouldn't have seen beforehand. It showed that I have control issues, where I tend to want to be controlling, and I think that's part of being the oldest child, and there's obviously some relation there, but yeah, different things that it definitely points out, where you see it and you're like, oh, I wish it wasn't that way. I need to change that.
Yeah.
And it's a continuous process. Obviously, the hope is to get it better and better and better, but you have to reveal these things first.
And certain things are just going to be your natural tendencies that you have to struggle against, right? I worked with a guy some years ago that he always bragged about me for not losing my temper. It's like he would tell the co-workers, like, oh yeah, this guy, he can hit himself with a hammer and he doesn't throw things, he doesn't get angry, he doesn't yell, he doesn't curse and swear. And I'm like, I've never been tempted to do that. Like, it's not even on my radar, right?
Right.
And so I have my other temptations. I have things that you know not of, right? Where I'm like, this is a real temptation. This is a real struggle. And so that tendency, partially because you were raised in a very orderly, neat, kind-hearted, ministerial type of home, partially because you're the oldest son, all those things create who you are.
Yeah.
And most of that is for the positive. Most of what your parents did for you that way is very, very beneficial to you and to the people around you. But it does also come off with some trade-offs where you're like, you're going to have temptations to things that the average guy is like, what are you talking about? I don't even think about those things. And you're like, no, this is a problem I have.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So you're married for 2 years now, and I know a good friend of mine, Pete Simons. You know him well too. He's started work or ministry for CCBR, bringing attention to the whole abortion issue, in particular to Canada, because there's no abortion laws in Canada. How did you guys start off with that? Was there like a call to that as well, or what's that like?
There was. So I think the whole process started mainly last year. My wife and I didn't know much about abortion. We knew that it was wrong, and we knew that it killed babies, but that's about the extent of what we knew.
That out there somewhere it's happening sometimes, right?
Yep. In our families, in our church, it wasn't really talked about. And so when Pete Simons got involved, he's one of the elders in our church, and so it started becoming more vocal in our church, more talked about. He would put on little events, maybe talking about what it was. We watched the movie called Unplanned, which is a movie about a former abortionist and sort of what goes on in abortions and how she got out of it. And him and his daughter, and Pete and his daughter, and 2 other people from our church went on a trip last February with the organization that Pete works for, CCBR. And the way the trip works is you fly to Florida, you get a day of apologetics training, and then you spend 4 days on college campuses talking with students about abortion, with big signs of showing aborted babies, terrible photos, with the goal to change hearts and minds about it. And so last year, with my wife and I having learned a lot more about what abortion actually was, what it does to babies, how common it is, like one in 3 to 4 women will have an abortion in their life. And yeah, there aren't any abortion laws in Canada. And so you could have your baby the next day, but abort your baby the day before, and it would be totally legal, no questions asked.
Most cases are people who regret having gotten pregnant.
Yep.
I would imagine young people that just don't, fooling around doing things, and before you know it, like, shoot, this is going to ruin my life, and then they'll take the selfish route, right?
Yeah, very difficult circumstances some people can be in sometimes, right? Like you think of the case of rape, or maybe in poverty, or
even just ignorance is hard to fathom. You're ignorantly out there fooling around as an 18-year-old. Nobody's really taught you much about it. Now now I'm pregnant. This is going to change my life forever.
Yeah.
And so give it as much benefit of the doubt, and then justify it as much as possible. Then it's like, they just think that they're stopping something that will alter their life, right?
Yeah. It's not really known what it is and what it does. And so last year, and I think it was November, then Pete from church had started talking about the Florida trip that they were doing again this year in February. And I don't even know really what it was that that got my wife and I to go, but we decided, you know what, maybe it would be good to go. It'll get us out of our comfort zone, which was a scary thought, but we thought would be beneficial for us, and just help us talking to people, to help with ability to evangelize and that sort of thing. And we thought, well, you know what, we'll be saving babies, so that would be cool. And so we signed up. We signed up too late to be approved, but they try and get new people in rather than people who've gone before, and so we got accepted, and that was a sign for us. Okay, you know what? We think God wants us to go on this trip. And so in February of this year, just a few months ago, we went to Florida with the whole group, and we had a very, very impactful time over there.
Yeah. For them or for you?
Both.
Hopefully both, eh?
Both.
Yeah. I once stood outside of London Hospital with a group of people were holding signs,
Okay.
anti-abortion signs. And
Yeah.
there was not many people to talk to because it's a busy street corner.
Mhm.
You're just, people drive by and honk or yell at you or something like that. But there's something very vulnerable about it where you're like, I'm taking a stand on an issue. I know you don't want to talk about it, but here's a picture of it, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, let's go,
Mhm.
right? It feels confrontational right from the
Yes.
get-go.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was very confrontational. I mean, we had, the staff members were amazing. First of all, they were super friendly and welcoming because when Amy and I were there, we didn't know anyone else. There were about 30, 35 people, not a single person we knew at all. So
Besides
that was,
Pete and Kira.
they actually were there the week after
Okay.
us. So it was,
You were there by
there
yourselves.
was no one we knew. I think it was good for us though, being able to get out of our comfort zones in that way. But we had a day of training where they taught us, hey, people are going to say this about abortion, you can respond with this.
Okay.
These are the strategies you should use for talking to people. This is why we use these strategies. This is what abortion actually does. And they gave us really good training to talk with people. And then, so we got there on a Friday. Saturday was our training day. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we were on college campuses, universities, with pamphlets and then big billboards showing pictures of abortion. And for the whole day, about 8 to 4, we would just go around and say, hey, what do you think about abortion? What do you think about abortion?
Just hundreds of conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think over the 1 week that we were there, our group had over 600 conversations with people. And it's very effective.
What do you think, generally speaking, the average university student, do they have somewhat of a comprehension of what abortion actually is, or are they just glossed over it in their minds?
It varies a lot.
Yeah.
The one man I talked to, I had to explain to him what abortion actually was. Like he hadn't even heard about it.
Oh, wow.
Like I asked him what he thought about abortion. He's like, what? What is that? So that was odd.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say he was by far the exception. Most people knew what it was. But then the views on it were just all over the place. From one lady who said that she loved abortion and had 6 of them, to obviously the guy who didn't know what it was, or to people who just think, I don't know what I think about it. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
And it was just we could see that the strategies were very, very effective for talking to people.
Okay. People walked away thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stats show that 67% of people who see photos of aborted babies think more negatively about it. And thousands of people walked past. Obviously, we can't talk to them all, and lots of them don't want to talk.
Yeah.
And then we had lots of conversations, and some conversations go really well, really quickly. I talked with one man, and in about 10 minutes, he went from not knowing what he thought about abortion to being against abortion in every circumstance.
Fully in agreement.
Fully pro-life.
Yeah.
But then other people you talk to for a few hours with no change, and it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. I'm almost, in my mind, I'm tying it back to your own personal history and life of not really seeing your own pride. And this sounds very sad to even put it this way, but the average person, secular person, non-Christian, doesn't really count each life as sacred from the time that they're conceived. Mm-hmm. To them, it probably is literally just a medical procedure. Once they have it done, many of them walk away feeling extreme guilt and they don't know what to do with it. But the average person out there is like, yeah, I mean, if you have a tumor, you remove it, whoop-de-doo, you go back to life, not a big deal. You heal and then you're good to go. But once they see that, hey, that attitude or that thing that's in your body actually has value and meaning and it's a soul, there shouldn't be any turning back after that. Like, they shouldn't be able to just dismiss it as readily. Yeah. You have to be pretty cold-hearted at that point.
They do. Yeah, and like the way that CCBR tries to approach it, the way they trained us, we don't use anything that's considered religious at all.
Okay.
And so our training is completely scientific and based and appealing to someone's conscience. So like we talk about, well, do you think that human beings should get human rights? And most people say yes. And then we have to explain that the baby's a human being worthy of human
where do
rights.
they become human, right? At what,
right.
what
And so
stage?
then we'll talk about that. But very, very often, we never bring into the discussion the idea of it having a soul necessarily.
Okay.
It's just basically the scientific facts. This is the human, and then you talk about why that human should get rights like every other human.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that can be very beneficial because lots of people see this as something that Christians specifically try and push on people using their religious views.
Right.
But when they see, oh, you're not using any religious views and you're still for this, that's interesting.
I guess in my mind then I'm thinking, what's to stop somebody from just thinking of humans as if they're animals? Like you and I, if a cow has a baby that's just, deformed or something, it's not going to have a good life. We put it down and we don't feel bad. It's like, that's too bad. But we don't feel guilt or shame or anything. And so somehow the image of God argument feels like it has to come in, or the soul, the eternality of a human being, right?
Yeah, like some people do make that argument. Well, what's the difference between a human and an animal?
Mm-hmm.
And all people know, at least should know if they're properly thinking about it, that human beings have value just because they're a human being.
Yeah.
And so we do talk about that. It's just less of the religious idea that they're made in God's image, because they could disagree with the fact that they're made in God's image.
Right. And you're trying to go deeper, almost to like the legal aspect of it.
Yep.
Like, how could this be legal? Why is it legal? Yeah.
We want to think, oh, well, it's wrong because it kills a living human being. And typically, I mean, depending on the person, it can be very effective.
Yeah. So you guys had hundreds of these conversations over the course of 4 days, you said?
Yeah, us and then the other members of the group.
You go back to the house just exhausted, your mind rolling like crazy?
Yes. That first day was so tiring.
And you're replaying certain conversations and I should have said this or that.
I still think about some of the conversations. There's a lot of pain and hurt behind a lot of the conversations.
From the people that you're talking to. Yeah.
The one man that I talked to, I asked him what he thought about abortion, and he's like, it's good. It's a good thing. I like abortions. I wish I was aborted.
Oh, man.
And right away you can see he's had a terrible life to where he thinks that, well, first of all, he should be aborted and other babies should be aborted as well. He talked briefly about his life and how it was terrible and how he doesn't want people to go through that.
Yep.
And obviously then you have an opening to share the gospel with them, something deeper.
Sometimes this topic in particular can affect women at a much deeper level yet, being that they're the ones that reproduce and carry children and all that. How did Amy handle all this?
It was a lot harder for her.
It's harder to be objective and just like factual, right? Where it's like, this is a person. This is something a person growing inside of a womb, right?
I think the hardest part for her was that she is naturally not confrontational.
Right.
And this trip was very, very confrontational, right? You go up to someone, ask them a question, expecting confrontation.
Yeah, confront them with one of the most diabolical things that happens in our society, and check to see where they're at about it. Yeah.
And so it was a lot harder for her in that regard. I'm a lot more confrontational, which has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
So for me, it was easier in that sense. But yeah.
Well, this is where our society has kind of they've almost left the confrontational aspects of these types of decisions to women. And naturally speaking, men are supposed to be the controversial ones, the ones that will be willing to face hardship and difficulty and face it head on and be confrontational and be logical and reasonable and not get too emotionally caught up and all that, and still be able to stand on facts and reason and science and scripture and all that, right? Not to say that women can't do it. They can and do an exceptional job of it at times, for sure. But the reason they often have to force themselves into confrontational roles is because men aren't doing it, right? There's a real lack there where we just like, whatever, it is what it is, right? So we need some of their emotion and their hurt almost to motivate and drive us to be more decisive. So you did that whole week, and was it there when you decided, I've got to do more of this, I want to help in some way?
It started for me when we were on the trip. I started thinking about it a lot more. Seeing how effective the strategies are, it's hard to, now with the knowledge that I have and the ability to talk with people about it, it's hard to think of just leaving that and just not touching it again.
I could literally change hundreds of people's minds.
And so I knew I wanted to do more, even if it was just volunteer work. But talking to some of the staff members on the trip about employment, working full-time for this organization to do the work full-time, it seemed like God was sort of pulling us in that direction, Amy and I. And once we got back from the trip, we started thinking about it and praying about it and talking about it a lot more. It was very interesting because we became aware on the trip that if we were to join staff, like be part of this organization that's doing this work, we would very likely have to move to Mississauga. That's where one of their larger offices is, where we would be doing the work out of. And before the trip, Amy and I had talked with other people just about moving in general. And for me, moving was never an option. Like, I would hear about people moving away from friends and family and everything they knew, and I thought, there's not a chance I'm ever doing that. That would be so hard. But it was very interesting because during and after the trip, Amy and I both realized, you know what? Moving doesn't seem like such a hard thing anymore.
Okay.
And for us, that was a big factor in our decision to join staff or to pursue it. Because we knew it would be hard. We knew we'd be leaving family and friends and church and our jobs for something where we would be in a very uncomfortable position many times, a sacrifice in many ways. Yeah. But we felt like with the situation we're in, the circumstances we're in right now, that God could be leading us to get more involved in that way.
So what is the plan then? You're moving to Mississauga. You're going to be training for the first several months, and then eventually you're going to have to raise support and funds to support you in full-time ministry or work, however you want to see it.
So it's still being worked out with the staff members, how it's going to all play out. But CCBR hosts a summer internship. So for July and August, Amy and I will be moving to the Mississauga area, and we'll be getting very in-depth training, a lot more so than even the Florida trip. So we'll be doing a lot of outreach, a lot of training, and they do everything from like public speaking training to actually giving presentations and that sort of thing. So it'll be a very in-depth training period. And if that goes well, and if everything plays out according to plan, then we'll be from there getting involved as staff members. But you're right, CCBR doesn't pay the salaries of their employees. They may do a small bonus on top of existing salaries, and so Amy and I will have to raise our salary through fundraising.
So you got the two challenges. Your actual work and ministry is going to hopefully change the culture's view of abortion, whether that's talking to individuals on the streets or universities or whatever, or hopefully on a larger scale convincing politicians and doctors and people who are higher up. But then at the same time, because you want to do that, you have to also convince people who know you and appreciate you to see the need for those changes to happen in society and support you, fund you in some way, right? So that's quite a challenge for you guys there. But if ever you were in a place to do it, like right now, you can get by with less funds than a young family with 3 or 4 kids or something. And
I think God has. Obviously, this is still new, and I think a few years from now we'll realize a lot more. Oh wow, God worked that out so clearly. But even now, we can start to see with the situation we're in. I think it's the best time to do it that it could be.
And even if you guys have some children in the next few years and you can't continue the same capacity that you were doing, knowing these things, being convinced and persuaded of them, will lead you to live a life anyway, no matter which life you decide to live, with more understanding of this.
Absolutely.
This sin and grievance that's happening, right? Yeah, interesting. Well, that should be an exciting, an interesting, informative summer for you.
Yeah.
Hopefully it goes well. You're gonna still try to continue to sell real estate and stuff on the side, or?
I'll likely keep my license while we're over there, just in case things don't work out, or maybe in the future try and sell some real estate over there. But for now, I'll just be an inactive real estate agent. I'll keep my license and put things on hold for now.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Hopefully people will be praying for you, and maybe once you have things up and running as far as how to fund you, it'll be all through the CCBR website, I'm assuming. What's CCBR stand for again?
Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform.
Bioethical Reform, okay. That sounds
interesting,
very polished,
name.
Right?
That's why we say CCBR.
Yeah.
It's easier to say.
Bioethical. Doesn't sound like you're talking about sin, very,
Well, that's their focus, right?
Yep, for sure.
The pro-life movement has 3 arms. They call them arms. There's the pastoral arm, which focuses on support for mothers who are maybe have considered not aborting their baby and they need help, financial or whatever the case may be. And then there's the political arm, which focuses on political changes in the pro-life movement, so talking to politicians and passing laws. And CCBR is in the educational arm.
Okay.
So the whole goal and focus of CCBR is to inform as many people as possible about what it actually is.
Yeah.
Mainly through the use of abortion victim photography.
Interesting.
So postcards, billboards, signs on the street, conversations with people, trucks that they drive around with pictures on the trucks.
Interesting. Telling stories, things like that, right?
Yeah.
I was listening to the biography of William Wilberforce, who was obviously very instrumental in changing the laws about the slave trade in England back in the 1600s, 1700s, I forget now. But he tried passing the laws to change the status of black individuals from slave to free and abolish that whole concept of trading individuals, human beings, right? And it just wasn't passing. It failed and failed and failed again. Like you've probably seen the movie Amazing Grace and all that.
I haven't seen it.
Okay. But what they found finally did start shaping and changing culture was not first trying to change the law. It was trying to make it unthinkable to the average person. So they wrote songs, they wrote plays, they wrote literature, poems, whatever, that took the hold of the people, like on a societal level, on a grassroots level, like Instagram stuff, right? And it started to shape people's thinking to where they were now knocking on the doors of the politicians and saying, you can't let this continue. Have you seen these ships The way they treat these people is not humane. It's disgusting, and no man should own another man, and on and on and on. And now all of society, and then finally near the end of Wilberforce's life, I don't have all the details, finally the law passed, and they were, obviously relieved and grateful that it finally happened. But it wasn't just, hey, we need to make sure the politicians change their views. It's grassroots level, which sounds like what CCBR is kind of focused on, the educational aspect of what actually happens here.
Yeah, it's very interesting with the abolitionist movement. CCBR really uses that to support the idea of abortion victim photography, because one of the main factors in the abolition of the slave trade was the use of images. They had there was a certain person who printed an image on a coin that was used as currency, and it was a picture of a black man in chains, and on the coin it said, "Am I not a fellow man and brother?" Something along those lines. And that photo, along with photos of what the circumstances were in on the slave ships that the slaves were carried on, those photos did a lot. And as you were saying, also with songs and poems and that sort of thing, they did a lot to change the public's opinion.
For sure. The description of somebody walking through a ship and the stench and seeing blood and chains and all that, and as they would describe it and preachers would talk about it, and people just started getting disgusted by the concept. They just thought it was, whatever, people are making money. And then it became very clear. And so same thing with abortion, just talking to people about, how they dump those babies. How some of them are still crying when they come out, that they're missing limbs, their heads are ripped off, they're just sucked out of their mother's wombs. Like that. You don't see these things, you don't hear them, nobody talks about them. And so to make that vivid in people's minds, I think is going to be pretty critical, and if we're ever going to overturn anything like that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right on, man. Anything else you had hoped to share?
No, I think it's everything.
Yeah, good. Well, all the best to you, and hopefully people will become more aware.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Right on. Thanks, Lucian.
Yeah.